The first warning came not with explosions, but with a whisper. Deep in the Oort cloud, where humanity's most distant research station hung like a fragile crystal against the infinite darkness of space, something changed. Station Alpha 9 was humanity's most remote outpost, a scientific listening post dedicated to monitoring deep space communication patterns. Its crew of 12 represented a microcosm of human potential. Dr. Kamal Nawaz, a Pakistani quantum communications expert, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a Canadian systems engineer, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a Brazilian xenobiological researcher, and 9 others, each selected not just for their exceptional skills, but for their ability to work seamlessly as a collective. The station's last transmission was a cryptic burst of static, a digital exhale that sent tremors through Earth's defense command. Most would have seen it as a simple communication failure. Admiral Elena Reyes saw something different. In the Global Integrated Defense Center, located beneath the Sierra Nevada mountains, holographic displays flickered with incoming data. The room buzzed with a controlled tension, not panic, but a focused energy that spoke to humanity's most remarkable trait: adaptability. "Play it again," Reyes commanded, her voice calm but carrying the weight of decades of strategic experience. The static crackled. Most would hear nothing. But Reyes noticed the subtle modulation, the almost imperceptible pattern hidden within the noise. This was no random signal failure. This was a message. Dr. Marcus Chen, the center's lead communication theorist, leaned forward. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces, peeling back layers of the transmission. "It's not just noise," he muttered. "There's a deliberate structure here." Outside the command center, the world was changing. In Beijing, quantum computing centers hummed to life. Silicon Valley's most brilliant minds began coordinating through encrypted networks. Research facilities from Mumbai to Moscow started sharing data at unprecedented speeds. The Calirian Imperium had made a calculation. They believed humanity to be fractured, primitive, easily intimidated. Their intelligence suggested a species divided by political boundaries, consumed by internal conflicts, technologically nascent. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The station's last known coordinates told a story, not of random targeting, but of careful selection. Alpha 9 sat at the absolute edge of human-controlled space, monitoring regions that most civilizations would consider too remote to matter. Its destruction was a message, a cosmic declaration of intent. "They're testing our response," Lieutenant Commander Aisha O'Keefe observed, her fingers tracing potential strategic scenarios on a holographic map. "Probing our boundaries." Admiral Reyes allowed herself the slightest smile. The Calirians didn't understand that boundaries were a human construct constantly meant to be challenged, reimagined, transcended. Within hours of the station's disappearance, a global response began to take shape. It wasn't a military mobilization in the traditional sense. Instead, it was a synchronization of human potential that defied traditional understanding of conflict. Universities redirected research. Technology companies paused commercial development. Government agencies from every continent began sharing information with a transparency that would have been impossible just decades earlier. The world wasn't preparing for a traditional conflict. They were preparing to redefine the very concept of strategic engagement. In that moment, humanity transformed. No longer a collection of nations, but a single breathing organism with a collective intelligence that could adapt faster than any known civilization in the galaxy. The Calirians had chosen to strike. They had no idea what was coming. Dr. Marcus Chen's war room defied every traditional concept of military strategy. Situated in a converted research facility nestled in the California mountains, it looked more like a creative think tank than a command center. Whiteboards covered in complex diagrams stretched across walls. Holographic displays flickered with data streams that seemed to dance rather than simply inform. The team assembled was anything but conventional. Dr. Aria Rodriguez, a 34-year-old anthropological systems theorist, stood at the center of the room. Her background was as unconventional as the space itself. a doctoral degree that bridged cultural anthropology with advanced computational linguistics. Behind her, a diverse group of experts represented a cross-section of human potential. The Calirians operate on a hierarchical communication model, Aria explained, her fingers swiping through holographic projections of alien communication patterns. Their entire societal structure is built on rigid information channels. They don't just communicate, they validate. A young programmer from Lagos, Michael Okonkwo, leaned forward. His specialty was quantum communication algorithms, but he listened with the intensity of someone who understood that true innovation comes from unexpected connections. Validation is their weakness, Michael murmured, fingers already dancing across a quantum interface. Every communication has to pass through multiple verification layers. That means bottlenecks. That means predictability. Dr. Chen nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The team wasn't just analyzing the Calirian communication system. They were preparing to understand it more deeply than the Calirians understood themselves. The room represented humanity's most potent weapon, collaborative intelligence. A Brazilian neural network specialist sat next to a Japanese quantum physicist. A Canadian linguistic expert discussed communication patterns with an Indian systems engineer. No single person held the complete solution, but together, they were becoming something more than the sum of their parts. Look at this, Aria said, pulling up a complex visualization. The hologram showed communication pathways that looked like intricate neural networks. Each verification point is a potential point of intervention, not disruption, intervention. The difference was critical. Disruption was loud, messy, predictable. Intervention was surgical, nuanced, transformative. Michael's algorithm began to map potential communication pathways. Lines of potential connection appeared, disappeared, recalculated. It wasn't just about breaking the system. It was about understanding its fundamental logic. "We're not going to fight their system," Dr. Chen said, his voice calm and measured. "We're going to speak its language better than they do." Outside the facility, the world continued its synchronized response. Research centers redirected resources. Universities paused traditional academic schedules. Technology companies set aside commercial interests. The global response wasn't just a military preparation. It was a collective reimagining of human potential. Aria's research had uncovered something profound about the Calirian communication model. Their system was built on the assumption of predictability. Every message was a performance of power, every communication a demonstration of hierarchical control. They didn't just exchange information, they reinforced their social structure with every interaction. They can't conceive of a communication system that doesn't validate hierarchy, she explained, which means they can't defend against a system that doesn't recognize their hierarchical assumptions. The team wasn't just preparing a response. They were developing a completely new form of strategic engagement, not a counterattack, but a fundamental reframing of how intelligent systems interact. As the day progressed, the room hummed with potential. Holographic displays shifted and recalculated. Algorithms danced. Theories emerged, were challenged, transformed. Humanity's greatest strength was becoming brilliantly clear: the ability to adapt, to understand, to reimagine the very concept of conflict. Commander David Rodriguez studied the holographic display, his fingers tracing the intricate web of cultural connections that would become humanity's most sophisticated weapon. The Psychological Operations Center looked nothing like a traditional military facility. Soft lighting, collaborative workspaces, and walls covered with cultural artifacts from around the globe told a different story of strategic engagement. "It's not about breaking them," he explained to his team. "It's about making them question everything they understand about themselves." The team was a masterpiece of human diversity and expertise. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a Nigerian cultural linguist, sat next to Professor Lai Wei, a Chinese media systems expert. A Brazilian communication theorist collaborated with a Canadian anthropological researcher. Each brought a unique perspective to the most delicate of strategic instruments: narrative. The Calirian civilization was built on a rigid hierarchical structure that prized certainty above all else. Their entire societal model depended on predictable information channels, carefully controlled communication, and a strict interpretation of historical narratives. Humanity was about to introduce complexity. "Look at their communication infrastructure," Dr. Okonkwo said, pulling up a holographic representation of Calirian media systems. The visualization was a maze of controlled information pathways, each channel carefully monitored and regulated. Professor Lai Wei zoomed in on a particular communication node. "See how tightly controlled these information streams are. They don't just control information, they validate it through multiple hierarchical checks." The team's strategy wasn't about spreading false information. It was about introducing nuance, creating subtle narrative friction that would make the Calirian system question its own foundations. Small, carefully crafted communications began to circulate through carefully identified channels. Historical documents were reinterpreted with just enough scholarly credibility to create doubt. Academic papers suggested alternative interpretations of long-held Calirian beliefs about their own history. In one instance, a meticulously researched document suggested that a pivotal moment in Calirian historical narrative might have a completely different interpretation. The document was so well crafted, so academically rigorous, that it would trigger endless debates within their scholarly and administrative circles. Another communication subtly highlighted internal contradictions in their societal structure. Not as an attack, but as an academic exploration that would create intellectual friction. "We're not trying to destroy their system," Commander Rodriguez explained. "We're introducing complexity. We're creating intellectual turbulence." The team developed communication strategies that would trigger the Calirians' own verification processes. Each narrative intervention was designed to make their bureaucratic systems work against themselves. A single leaked communication, crafted with surgical precision, could create months of internal investigation and debate. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the commander but equally brilliant, had developed an algorithm that could predict how Calirian information systems would process and validate communications. "Their system is so rigid," she explained, "that it becomes predictable. And predictability is a vulnerability." Holographic displays showed potential narrative pathways, each line representing how information might flow, mutate, and be interpreted within the Calirian communication infrastructure. The psychological operation wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. Carefully placed academic papers, strategically leaked historical interpretations, nuanced communication interventions, each designed to create intellectual friction. The goal wasn't to break the Calirian system, but to make it question its own fundamental assumptions. "Complexity is our weapon," Commander Rodriguez said, watching the holographic displays shift and recalculate. "We're introducing them to the most dangerous concept they've ever encountered: uncertainty." The world was watching, united in a collective effort to redefine strategic engagement. Humanity wasn't just responding to a threat. They were demonstrating a profound understanding of communication as a strategic instrument. The infiltration of the Calirian faster-than-light communication network began not with a crash of digital weaponry, but with the delicate precision of a master musician tuning an impossible instrument. Dr. Marcus Chin's team had transformed an abandoned particle research facility in the Chilean Atacama Desert into the most sophisticated technological listening post in human history. The facility looked more like an art installation than a high-tech research center. Curved walls lined with adaptive holographic displays created an environment that seemed to breathe with technological potential. "It's not about breaking through," Dr. Chen explained to his lead engineer, Sofia Rodriguez. "It's about understanding the entire system's language." The Calirian communication network was a marvel of technological engineering. Faster-than-light communication channels woven through quantum entanglement, information pathways that seemed to defy traditional understanding of data transmission. Most civilizations would approach such a system with brute force hacking attempts. Humanity was about to demonstrate a different approach. Sophia's fingers danced across quantum interfaces, creating mapping algorithms that were less about invasion and more about translation. Each line of code was a linguistic probe, designed to understand rather than destroy. "Look at the communication patterns," she said, pulling up a holographic representation that looked more like an intricate biological network than a technological system. Quantum-entangled information streams pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Dr. Kamal Nawaz, the team's quantum communications expert, had developed a revolutionary approach. Instead of trying to break through the Calirian system, they were learning to speak its language. Each quantum probe was a sophisticated listener, collecting not just data, but the fundamental communication patterns that defined the network. The infiltration was a symphony of technological understanding. Small quantum sensors, developed in a collaborative effort between research centers in Bangalore, Tokyo, and Berlin, began to map the communication network. These weren't traditional sensors, but adaptive listening devices that could change their quantum signature to match the surrounding communication environment. "We're not just collecting information," Dr. Nawaz explained. "We're learning the system's fundamental communication rhythm." Calirian technicians continued to believe the minor system anomalies were routine maintenance issues. They had no concept of the sophisticated listening process happening within their most secure communication channels. Each communication pathway was carefully mapped, not just its technical structure, but its cultural and contextual implications. The team wasn't just collecting data, they were building a comprehensive understanding of how the Calirian technological ecosystem communicated. Dr. Chen's approach was revolutionary. Where traditional technological infiltration sought to break or manipulate systems, his team was creating a comprehensive translation matrix. They were developing the ability to not just understand the Calirian communication network, but to anticipate its responses. Sophia's quantum mapping algorithms began to reveal deeper patterns. Communication channels that seemed random started to show intricate, predictable rhythms. The Calirian system, so proud of its complexity, was revealing its fundamental limitations. Their entire communication infrastructure is built on a hierarchical validation model, Sophia observed. Every piece of information goes through multiple verification layers. That means predictability. That means vulnerability. The facility hummed with potential. Quantum computers developed in collaboration with international research centers processed massive amounts of data. Machine learning algorithms developed in research centers from Sao Paulo to Moscow began to identify communication patterns. It wasn't just technological infiltration. It was a profound act of understanding. Calirian technicians would continue to believe their system was secure. They had no concept of the sophisticated listening process happening within their most protected communication channels. Humanity was writing a new language of technological engagement, one of understanding, translation, and profound technological empathy. The moment arrived during the Calirian Imperium's most critical military exercise, a demonstration of technological might that had been planned for solar cycles. Deep in the Carina Nebula, their most advanced fleet gathered in a show of calculated precision. Admiral Elena Reyes watched the holographic displays in the Global Integrated Defense Center, her expression a study in calm calculation. Around her, a team of the most brilliant strategic minds humanity had assembled worked with a synchronized rhythm that defied traditional military protocols. "Initiate Phase 1, she said quietly. The intervention began not with a dramatic burst of energy, but with the subtlest of technological whispers. Navigation systems experienced the most minute of disruptions, so small that initial system checks would report nothing unusual. Commander David Rodriguez monitored the communication pathways. "We're not attacking," he explained to the team. "We're demonstrating." The Calirian fleet continued its exercise, completely unaware of the sophisticated intervention happening around them. Their faster-than-light communication networks began to experience microscopic latency issues. Navigational calculations became incrementally less precise. Each system check would return normal parameters, creating a growing sense of subtle uncertainty. Dr. Marcus Chen's team had developed something beyond a traditional technological intervention. This was a precise demonstration of capability, a message written in the language of technology. In the fleet's command centers, junior officers began to notice small inconsistencies, a navigation calculation that was off by mere milliseconds, a communication ping that took just a fraction longer than expected. Nothing dramatic, nothing immediately alarming, but enough to create doubt. The Calirian military exercise continued, each moment becoming a more complex psychological test. Their most advanced systems, designed with absolute precision, began to experience the most subtle of disruptions. "We're teaching them a lesson in complexity," Dr. Sofia Rodriguez muttered, watching the holographic displays shift and recalculate. No ships were disabled. No weapons were triggered. Instead, humanity was demonstrating a fundamental truth. True technological superiority was about understanding, not destruction. The fleet's primary navigation systems began to show the most minute of discrepancies. Calculation paths became slightly less efficient. Communication channels developed imperceptible delays. To any external observer, the fleet would appear to be functioning normally. But the Calirian command structure was built on absolute precision. These microscopic disruptions would trigger multiple layers of internal investigation. Admiral Reyes allowed herself the slightest smile. They're about to spend more energy investigating these disruptions than they would in an actual conflict. The demonstration was a masterpiece of strategic communication. Humanity could completely neutralize their technological advantages with minimal effort. The message was clear: we can do this. We choose not to. In communication centers across the Calirian fleet, junior officers began preparing extensive reports. Navigation specialists started complex investigation protocols. What should have been a straightforward military exercise had become a labyrinth of internal scrutiny. "It's not about breaking their system," Commander Rodriguez explained. "It's about making them question the fundamental reliability of their most advanced technologies." The psychological impact would reverberate far beyond this single exercise. Every Calirian technological system would now be viewed with a newfound sense of uncertainty. As the exercise concluded, the Calirian fleet would return to their home systems, not damaged, but fundamentally changed. They had encountered an opponent that understood their technology better than they understood it themselves. Humanity had just redefined the concept of strategic demonstration. The diplomatic communication arrived not with thunderous declarations, but with the precision of a quantum-encrypted transmission that would reshape galactic understanding. Ambassador Aisha O'Keefe stood in the Global Diplomatic Coordination Center, surrounded by a team that represented the most sophisticated approach to interstellar communication humanity had ever assembled. The room was a testament to collaborative intelligence. Holographic displays showed intricate networks of cultural, technological, and strategic information. "This isn't a surrender," she explained to her team. "This is a reimagining of interstellar engagement." The document had been crafted with surgical precision. Months of psychological, technological, and cultural analysis had been distilled into a communication so nuanced that it would challenge the fundamental assumptions of Calirian diplomatic protocols. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the team's cultural systems analyst, had spent countless hours developing a communication strategy that would penetrate the Calirians' rigid hierarchical communication structure. "We're not just sending a message," she explained. "We're creating a complex narrative that their entire diplomatic system will be compelled to process." The ultimatum was revolutionary in its approach. It wasn't a demand for surrender, but an invitation to a new form of interstellar relationship. Each paragraph was a carefully constructed intellectual intervention, designed to create maximum psychological impact. The first section addressed the initial attack on humanity's outer solar system station. But instead of a traditional protest, it was a detailed cultural and strategic analysis that demonstrated humanity's complete understanding of the Calirians' motivations. "Notice how we're not just responding," Ambassador O'Keefe pointed out. "We're demonstrating a level of understanding that goes beyond their own self-perception." The document explored the Calirians' technological and cultural limitations with such precision that it would trigger their most fundamental verification processes. Each statement was supported by layers of evidence so comprehensive that it would force their diplomatic and scientific communities into months of analysis. Dr. Kamal Nawaz had developed a communication encryption method that was itself a work of art. The transmission would adapt its communication signature to match the Calirians' own verification protocols, ensuring it would be processed through their most secure channels. "We're speaking their language," he explained, but in a way they've never experienced before. The diplomatic team had identified the critical vulnerabilities in the Calirian communication and validation systems. The ultimatum was designed to create maximum intellectual friction, not through confrontation, but through a profound demonstration of understanding. Sections of the document would trigger different response pathways within the Calirian bureaucratic system. Military command structures would receive one layer of communication. Scientific communities would process another. Each layer was crafted to create a specific type of intellectual and strategic pressure. "This isn't about winning a conflict," Ambassador O'Keefe said. "This is about transforming the entire concept of interstellar engagement." The final section was the most subtle. It wasn't a threat or a demand, but an invitation to a new form of galactic cooperation. The language was so precisely crafted that it would force the Calirian leadership to reconsider their entire approach to interstellar relations. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up the final draft on the holographic display. "We're giving them a path forward that they can't ignore, but also can't easily reject." As the transmission prepared to be sent, the team understood they were doing more than sending a diplomatic communication. They were rewriting the rules of interstellar engagement. The Calirian Imperium was about to receive a message that would challenge everything they understood about communication, diplomacy, and strategic interaction. The response from the Calirian Imperium did not arrive with the expected diplomatic formality. Instead, it came as a complex series of communications that revealed the profound impact of humanity's strategic approach. In the Global Diplomatic Coordination Center, Admiral Elena Reyes, Ambassador Aisha O'Keefe, and Dr. Marcus Chen watched as the transmissions began to unfold. The holographic displays seemed to breathe with intricate layers of information, each communication revealing deeper levels of complexity. "They're processing our message in ways they never anticipated," Dr. Chen observed, his fingers tracing the intricate communication pathways. The Calirian response was a testament to the transformative power of humanity's approach. Their rigid communication structures had been fundamentally challenged. The diplomatic ultimatum had not just been received, it had been comprehensively dismantled and reconstructed. Scientific communities within the Calirian Imperium began to publish unprecedented analyses. Research papers appeared that questioned fundamental assumptions about interstellar communication, technological engagement, and cultural interaction. The intellectual tremors would reshape their entire understanding of strategic communication. Ambassador O'Keefe noticed something extraordinary. "They're not just responding," she said quietly. "They're reimagining their entire approach to interstellar relations." The transformation wasn't a surrender. It was a profound intellectual evolution. Other galactic civilizations watched with increasing fascination. Humanity had demonstrated something revolutionary, a form of strategic engagement that transcended traditional concepts of conflict and diplomacy. The Calirian military command structure began to experience internal transformations. Their rigid hierarchical systems started to develop more adaptive communication protocols. The psychological and technological interventions had introduced a level of complexity that their entire civilization was now forced to process. "We didn't defeat them," Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained during a global briefing. "We invited them to understand themselves differently." Research centers across the Calirian systems began collaborative projects that would have been unimaginable mere solar cycles earlier. Interdisciplinary teams formed, breaking down the rigid barriers that had defined their scientific and cultural approaches for generations. The diplomatic resolution became a case study in a new form of interstellar engagement. Humanity had demonstrated that true strategic power wasn't about destruction, but about understanding. Each intervention, economic, technological, psychological, had been a precise instrument of transformation. Dr. Kumbal Nawaz presented a comprehensive analysis of the communication strategies. "We didn't just send a message," he explained. "We created a complex adaptive system that forced a fundamental reconsideration of their entire civilization's approach to communication." The Calirian Imperium's response was multifaceted. Diplomatic channels opened in ways that defied their previous rigid protocols. Scientific exchanges became more fluid. Cultural understanding began to replace traditional hierarchical control mechanisms. "This is more than a diplomatic resolution," Admiral Rice remarked. "This is a fundamental reimagining of interstellar potential." Other galactic civilizations began to take notice. The human approach wasn't about conquest or destruction. It was about creating complex, adaptive systems of understanding. Humanity had demonstrated a form of strategic engagement that was profoundly different from any known approach. The final communication from the Calirian Imperium was itself a work of art. It wasn't a traditional diplomatic document, but a complex, multidimensional exploration of the interaction between their civilization and humanity. Dr. Marcus Chen studied the transmission, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We didn't just change their approach to diplomacy," he said. "We introduced them to an entirely new way of understanding complexity." As the global team reviewed the final communications, they understood that they had achieved something far more significant than a traditional victory. They had transformed the very concept of interstellar engagement. Humanity had not conquered. They had invited the universe to understand a new possibility of interaction. The first strike was financial, a symphony of economic precision that would make traditional warfare look like a crude instrument. Ambassador Aisha O'Keefe stood in the Global Economic Coordination Center, a massive circular room where holographic displays represented the intricate web of global and interstellar economic systems. Her team was unlike any diplomatic corps in human history. Economists worked alongside network specialists, data scientists collaborated with cultural experts, and quantum computing analysts mapped out strategies that defied conventional understanding. The Calirian economic system was a marvel of centralized control. Massive trade networks spread across multiple star systems, each transaction carefully monitored, each economic decision filtered through layers of hierarchical approval. They believed their system was impenetrable, a testament to their technological superiority. They were about to learn the art of economic subtlety. "Target identified," whispered Raj Mehta, a brilliant network strategist from Mumbai. His fingers danced across quantum interfaces, creating economic pressure points so delicate they were almost invisible. In Lagos, a collective of programmers led by Adebayo Okonkwo began their part of the operation. Cryptocurrency algorithms they had developed were about to become sophisticated economic scalpels. These weren't just lines of code. They were precise instruments of economic intervention. The attack wasn't about destruction. It was about disconnection. Calirian trade routes began to experience microscopic disruptions. A shipping contract here would be delayed by milliseconds. A financial transfer there would be routed through unexpected channels. Each intervention was so small, so precise, that individual transactions seemed normal. But the cumulative effect was devastating. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in complex systems, watched the holographic displays with a keen eye. "We're not breaking their system," she explained to a young analyst. "We're revealing its inherent fragility." Tokyo's quantum computing centers synchronized with research facilities in Sao Paulo. Algorithms developed in Berlin interacted with machine learning systems in New Delhi. The global response was a living, breathing organism of collective intelligence. The beauty of the economic intervention was its subtlety. No markets crashed dramatically. No alarms sounded. Instead, the Calirian economic system began to experience economic pressure so precise it was almost artistic. Trade routes became slightly less efficient. Communication channels developed imperceptible delays. Financial calculations showed microscopic discrepancies that would drive their rigid bureaucratic systems into paranoid analysis. Look at their verification protocols, Raj pointed out. Each economic anomaly would trigger multiple layers of bureaucratic review. What would normally be a simple transaction now became a complex investigation. Time became a weapon. Every investigation, every review, every moment of bureaucratic hesitation created economic friction. In the Calirian command centers, economic advisors would begin to notice something was wrong. But by the time they could identify the source, the global human team would have already shifted their approach. Adebayo's team in Lagos had developed something revolutionary. Their algorithms didn't just manipulate economic systems, they learned from them. Each interaction provided more data, more understanding of the Calirian economic model. "We're not fighting their system," Aisha remarked, watching the holographic displays. "We're teaching it a new language of interaction." The economic intervention was happening on multiple levels simultaneously. Cryptocurrency networks created alternative transaction paths. Quantum computing systems identified and exploited microscopic inefficiencies. Cultural analysis provided insights into how the Calirian bureaucracy would respond. No single action was dramatic, but the cumulative effect was transformative. The Calirian economic system, so proud of its centralized control, was about to learn a fundamental lesson about adaptability. Humanity wasn't just challenging their economic model, they were redefining the very concept of economic engagement.